And you wouldn't like that, would ya?
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Kennel Podcast. Once again, I'm Foxhound, and today with me, I've got a very special guest. I've got someone that I look up to a great deal in the martial arts, and I fanboy out a little bit on. But we've got the author of The Liar, the Cheat, and the Thief, as well as The Hustler, and the carrier of the Random Flow system from Sunny Umpad, Maija Soderholm. Welcome to the podcast.
I'll do like you did.
I was excited.
I'm excited too.
Yeah, welcome. I'm since being in California, one of my main things was getting up to train with you. I've only made it up the once. Thank you, coronavirus. But at this point, things are opening back up. So hopefully another time or two before I get out of here. But
yeah, you're more than welcome, obviously.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I know Defender Dog was up to train with you right before our gathering, which he went through quite an odyssey to make that work.
I know, he did. He changed his flight and then that got delayed, so he changed it again. I mean, it was complete insanity. That guy has real commitment. It was fun, that was really, really cool. It was I'm glad he made it, and I hope I made it worth his while. We trained for a couple hours, so.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he talked about it. We spent the next few days together. We talked about it quite a bit. And if there's one thing Steve it's committed, and possibly should be committed if you spend a few days in a small space with him. But no, he had a really good time. And he said the same thing that I said after that session was like, and that whole 1 in 3 chance when you're in a blade fight of walking away, like either I'm better and you die, or we're equal and we both die, or I am worse and you walk away. We both felt at the end that our chances were whittled significantly down because, we're both active fighters within the Dog Brothers, and with a stick in our hands, we feel pretty confident about ourselves. And as soon as the blades came out, all of a sudden we were like, I might be lucky to also kill her. Like, I think I'm not walking away from this one no matter what. The way that you exploit these tiny openings in the way that we don't realize we're leaving them, and we're like, oh, I'm gonna get, before I kind of knew what I was getting into when I came up to train with you, and beforehand I had sort of said in my head, like, Maija's gonna be impressed. I'll get her real quick off the bat when we do a little flow. And like, no, not even a little bit. Right away I went, oh no. And the difference in training with the blade and the stick, and especially if you're able to sort of channel the mindset of the blade, is all of a sudden the danger is exponential, and just being touched becomes a much bigger deal.
Yeah, it's kind of a trip, right? The fact that there's like real danger can happen with zero power necessary. Like there's no wind up, there's nothing. It's just like I just kind of have to stand here with something pointing at you, and suddenly, entering becomes a whole different problem.
Exactly. But anyway, I don't want to overdo the microphone here. Anybody that's listening to this podcast, you could have someone who's brand new to martial arts. You could have someone who knows already all about you. I learned about Sunny via Mark Denny's video, The Grandfather Speak 2, which was filmed near the very end of Sunny's life. You and some of his other students were in, parts of the video, and that relatively early on in my Dog Brothers experience, sort of reassured me that the sword was going to be there. I came to Filipino martial arts through a stabbing, and then my interest in the sword, but just not having the same physical outlet that I was still looking to. I was in my early 20s. So for me, like I was playing rugby and lacrosse and football and hockey. And so I still needed the part of things, and I couldn't find that. But early in Dog Brothers, I saw this like, oh, we do still care about the blade. And that sort of was like where I began my fascination with Sunny and learning about his death, and then finding out about yourself and Jay up in the Bay Area was kind of cool. So why don't you sort of tell everybody that wouldn't have the same background as me, who you are and what you do, and the carrying on of a legacy that is sort of passed to you.
Well, I'm nobody particularly interesting. I write in the first book that it's completely random set of circumstances that led me to be in the right place at the right time, in the same, not actually in the same city, but 5 minutes drive away from Sonny's house. And then knowing people that trained with him, which gave me access. If people are not familiar with Sonny, he was incredibly reclusive. He was a hermit, somewhat agoraphobic. Probably had a whole bunch of PTSD in there and demons that he was working out. His house was booby trapped, for instance. Like, you never turned up to his house without him knowing that you were coming. You know, he was a very paranoid dude, but incredibly humble and amazing, and also a really brilliant teacher and super generous at the same time. But yeah, I mean, the fact that I got to go train with this guy, this like sword guy from the Philippines, who's one of the few I think left that of, you know, that generation that was still doing sword and really had done it for real back in the day on Dar streets, if you like. You know, to get like a blade master, it's just like, how did I meet this man? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But you know, happenstance did take me there, and I've always loved martial arts. And again, I don't know why. It's like music. Why do you like certain pieces of music? You know, it's like, this band makes me happy, I will listen to more of it. It's like you don't seem to have control over that. And I think martial arts is the same way. You're just like, oh yeah, I want to do this. This is totally fun. And when I saw Sonny moving, it was immediate. I mean, I saw him on VHS tape back in the day.
Yeah.
VHS
Yep.
tape. And I was like, oh my goodness, there it is. That's exactly what I want to do. I've always looked for that. That's it. That's it. That's what I've been looking for. I've been looking for things that are like that, but they weren't it. And that's actually it. Who knew? And that was my mission then, to go train with him. And I've always liked swords, though. So swords has always been something I liked ever since I was a kid, and watching Errol Flynn movies and Three Musketeers and stuff. I always figured myself, you know, I was like a swashbuckler, trying to say that. I was more interested in that stuff, you know,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
all this, rather than the Japanese austere stuff. Like, the Japanese stuff didn't really draw me as much as the much
The
more
European.
the European stuff. And of course, like when I was growing up, you know, during that era, there wasn't HEMA. Nobody was doing anything. I
Yeah.
mean, I think if I was 20 now, this is what I would do. I would be absolutely into HEMA.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't it. So anyway, I randomly come across this guy, Sonny, and get accepted as a private student of his. And that was it. That was it was my favorite time of the week.
Mm.
Twice a week, I'd go train with him privately for all the years that, you know, I got before he died. And it was just amazing. And he basically changed my brain in a very weird and interesting way. And he died prematurely at the age of 58. I'll be 58 this year, so that's kind of weird. And I think he had a lot more to teach, but I'll never know what it was. So he kind of left this weird thing hanging where it was like, well, there it is, you know, and there was more, but sorry. You know, I was like, oh shit. But the thing to remember, and I think this is very common amongst the traditional Filipino ways of teaching, it's not a system, it's not a box of, you know, it's not a book with everything listed out, and then once you've gone from the beginning of the book to the last page, you have it. He taught in a way where it was much more like, this is what I do. This is what I do. This is what works for me. And I have decided that I will show you what works for me. Apart from always his secret stuff that I'm sure he kept to himself. But, you know, regardless, you know, he's like, I'm not really teaching you. I'm just saying this is what I do. It's like, then what you do has nothing really to do with it. This is just my gift to you, you know, that I'm giving to you. And then after that, you take it and make it yours. So it's kind of an interesting thing to carry, in that it's not actually a historical object, if you like. It's not the book. The book has not been handed to me. It's more like, this is what I did and I was really good at it, and now I'm dead. And it's like, what the hell do you do with that? You know, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's
what
weird.
do you do with that? Because you don't have, you know, as particularly as an American who, I did martial arts as a kid, I did karate and stuff, and you know, you want this, well, to get your yellow belt, you know, these basic punches, these basic kicks, this kata, and this like thing you have to do. But you know, that's not how people have learned how to fight in the world
No.
over time. That's how you sell Americans something that their kids will keep doing. And that's something that I think a lot of Americans don't necessarily grasp about the martial arts, is that, you know, everyone wants to know, you know, what rank are you? Oh, you do jujitsu. What belt are you? I'm a white belt. Oh, well, you're not very good. I don't know. Let's grapple. Like that's one of those things. Like, oh, like what belt are you in Filipino martial arts? I have a kind of tan one on today. Like, I don't know.
Well, that's it. You know, I mean, I remember, and I remember distinctly when Sonny died, or maybe it was even while he was still alive. There was somebody came to visit, or somebody was around. For some reason, we were training, and this guy was part of the group, and he's like, "Oh, you do Filipino arts? What do you know? You know, show me something." And I'm just like, I actually have nothing to show you. It's like we actually have to spar for anything to come out.
Right.
It's like you need to give me something.
Yeah.
And if you just stand there and do, you know, there's nothing.
I'm just gonna hit you number one. I'm just like, well, I'm gonna do this.
Well, no, well, if he comes in with a number one and I'm out of range, I don't need to do anything, right? So it's a very weird moment where I was just like, or he'd just come out and then stop, you know, like people give you the opportunity to do applications or techniques. And I was just like, well, you know, and he was just like, well, that's completely ridiculous and stupid. You know what I mean? Like he was just unimpressed. But it was weird because at the time I couldn't articulate what I knew at all. Because it's a reactive system. Like you said, it's actually teaching you how to fight. It's not teaching you, you know, A, B, C, D, E, stick it in the box, right? It's not like, oh, I have application 1. I have 4 applications of strike number 3. And then, you know, if I step to the left, that's a 5th one. If I step to the right, it's a 6th one. You know, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So there was nothing to show. So it was funny. I mean, it was funny, but it really struck me because having never done any other Filipino systems, I didn't know that that's how everybody else trained.
Right. Oh, they all want to see, show me your sinawali, show me your hubad, show me your sombrada. And like, okay, cool. But like, can you do that if I'm throwing number 1 at you as hard as I can?
Yeah, exactly. Like where does that come in? Where does that fit into the whole pattern of things? Because I think the information that is taught that way is actually valid. I think there are certain things that people do. Like if they miss that, their tendency is to do A, B, or C, which means that the patterns that people teach are if they do A, do this, if they do B, do that, right? So, I mean, there is some like reason to how they teach. It's just that you don't understand what the reasoning is, so you can never use it.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And that's something that, you know, through the laboratory of the Dog Brothers gatherings, some of that stuff has come out. I do know how to use sinawali in a double stick fight. I wouldn't take 2 equally length weapons into a fight. I know that now. If I were to enter into an actual a bladed combat, I would be much more likely to go with a long and a short, or a long and something on my other hand, a buckler or something like that. 2 long weapons. There's a reason you don't see a lot of that historically in fencing, right? Like,
oh well,
often...
I mean, next time you come visit, we'll do double sword.
All right, we'll have to.
I'll show you how to make one longer than the other one.
Oh, okay. I already can kind of have an idea, but I don't want to spill it. I'd rather just have you show me. But that's you know, a big thing right now I'm playing with is within Espada y Daga, having the dagger do more, because one thing that's come out a lot in full contact fighting is that really this is just a deterrent from wrestling. In the Dog Brothers laboratory type gathering fights, now we just have a single stick fight where nobody gets to grapple, and this is used very little. So I'm trying to come up with getting it into play a little bit more. Everyone
it's
has
harder because it's shorter. Wouldn't it be nice if it was slightly longer, and then you could get into play like way more, right?
Exactly. But there's, you know, like I said, there's some little ideas in there. So anyway, kind of back onto the topic. So what you're kind of saying is that you weren't given, well, now you will teach my, you know, my set of steps and I will live in immortality forever. It was kind of like, well, good luck with it. See you on the next time around on the wheel.
Well, I mean, traditionally in the Philippines, if you look at stuff even still in the Philippines, everybody that's teaching it has a different name for it. You know, it's like nothing travels from one person to the other. If you look like do an old traditional system, you know, like some of the bigger, it's like I do Balintawak. Okay, fine. You know, I do Dosi Paris, and that has kind of become a box of things now, right? But back in the day, you know, you learned from somebody, and then you went off and did it yourself, and it was nothing to do with anybody else. That's what Sonny meant by, you know, after that it's up you, you know, you take it and you make it yours. It's like you lose a fight, it's not my fault. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is not my stuff that killed you. This is your lack of ability or your stupid decisions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's nothing that you're meant to even pass on. I mean, I think it's really interesting because I think there's two ways of passing on material. There's probably way more actually, but I do think there's a historical context and a culture that that there's a quality of Filipino movement. There's a quality of Cebuano movement from the group in the Visayan Islands that's slightly different in particular. And so that quality of motion and the flavor of it is a historical thing that shouldn't be lost. And when you talk to Jay, you know, Jay is very interested in his cultural heritage and preserving all those parts, you know, that go back in time through history that make the Filipino culture. And then within the Philippines, all the different island groups and the different tribes different from each other. I mean, it's incredibly rich, right? Because they're always having to fight people coming in or each other, you know, so it's culturally very much part of it. But for me, I feel I'm much more part of the lineage where I'm not teaching, I'm not Sonny, I'm never going to fight like Sonny. Sonny could do stuff I couldn't do. But everything, all the ways I fight is because of what he gave me, if you like, and then probably some stuff about, you know, that came from Bagua and the other Chinese systems that I do, right? So there's a certain quality of motion that's inbuilt into my body, but mostly my personality gets put in there. You know, the way that I'm seen as an enemy by others gets put into there. It's what I talk about in the Hustler book. So it's like I can't remove myself from the process of what I share. So in a sense, what I'm doing is exactly the same. I'm like, this is what I do. Take whatever it's in there and make it yours. But in that sense, it's also going to get lost. Do you see what I'm saying? So the cultural elements are going to get lost in the way I teach it, because what the gift to me that I got from Sonny was understanding strategy and tactics and being able to get like a meta view of the battlefield, if you like. Yeah. Like I can play with space and time in really weird ways because of how I see what's going on. You know, and is that something that somebody else is going to be able to get off me? Yeah, maybe if they spend time, they're going to have to move with me a lot to be able to see what I see out of my eyes. So it depends how much somebody wants to see it out of my eyes and how much they want to carry on their own path as to then how much they get of what Sonny was passing on. You know, and if there's any real, I feel a huge obligation to pass his material on and get his name mentioned as somebody that was an absolute genius at what he did and super unusual human being. Because I think, you know, I make jokes about like he saw the Matrix, but it's like that. When you were fighting him, it was like he had this perception of space that was completely different to everybody else's. You know, he could see the tracks of things before and afterwards in time. He could see many steps ahead and all the arcs of the way things moved. It's really, really interesting.
Like a chess master, like someone who you know, I can think like 2 moves ahead, maybe in chess. Like I could maybe set up a couple of traps and forks and stuff like that. But when you have a master, my opening move, they've got the whole game. They've got the whole game based on that first thing you do.
Yeah, it's almost like there's kind of a smell to the situation. You know, like they're working on a level that's nothing mechanical in it. You know what I mean? Like that it's an essence of whatever they're doing because of the way that they understand time and space and people. You know, I was talking, we're archiving Sonny's material, or my part of it at least, with the Immersion Labs Foundation project. So we were talking about how to structure it. And of course, structuring it is incredibly difficult. It's like, well, do you want to go by weapon or range? And I'm like, no, you know, and that doesn't work. So we were looking at how to actually do it. And I think this idea that, you know, when Sonny was saying, I'm teaching you how to see, it's like, what are we actually looking at? If somebody was like, I want to teach you how to see fighting. Right. Like, okay, well, what are we trying to see? What are we trying to find? I mean, have you thought about that? It's like, what are you trying to learn when you fight, apart from, I mean, obviously you've got to control your body, you've got to control your balance and gravity and all that shit. And then you've got to become connected to the weapon that you're using. Right. So there's weapon manipulation and understanding weight and balance and like there's that element to it.
Sure.
And then what is it that what is it you're trying to look at? I mean, openings, yeah, but what does opening mean? What about timing or range? It's like those things are connected.
Yeah.
So it's like you're trying to understand physiology, physics. Sorry about my dogs barking. You probably hear
That's
them.
all right.
Physiology, physics, and psychology.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not sure if there's anything else. Obviously, there's environment and terrain and context, right? Everything happens in spaces. So there's that. There's an understanding of it's really hot here, so the feet are targets because people wear sandals. Or the steel's really shitty here, and so I can't use my weapon in certain ways, right? So there's definitely that. So there's a contextual understanding too, I guess. Maybe that's for.
Yeah, that's environment, context. I can't think of anything beyond. You really sum it up. You have physiology. Okay, we're both human beings. We have our vulnerable parts. We have our strengths. The psychology part is. It seems. I highly encourage people to read Maija's books because it gets into the psychology of it, even if you're not a Filipino martial arts. I'm doing everything I can to not let this become just a Filipino martial arts podcast. My next guest is a Muay Thai guy and a Krabi guy, but within the context of fighting in general, the psychology is so important. And something that if you watch the UFC, we witnessed last night with Israel Adesanya and Marvin Vettori, Izzy was in his head bad. And you saw it all the way to the end. And I even reposted the butt pat from near the end of the fight where he was like, I got you, man. I don't even need to try and finish you. I just need to let you keep running onto my strikes. And, getting into someone's head isn't necessarily just shit talking. It can go wrong.
But it can be.
It can be. It very well can be. And especially if you're someone who's comfortable with shit talking. I'm from within the United States, a shit talking culture, northeastern Massachusetts, the Boston area. We talk some smack. The New York guys, very comfortable talking a lot of shit. There's other parts of the country and the world where that unsettles people. They're not used to being talked to like that. Even my friends and I are fairly disrespectful when we talk to each other in that way because culturally that works. You get a guy like a Nick Diaz, you're not going to break him by talking smack to him. But then other people like, not to go through the opponents of Conor McGregor, Nick Diaz didn't work. Jose Aldo broke him. One punch. Khabib Nurmagomedov. Not so much, sir. Not so much. All you did was enrage that man till he created a little ball of anger and hatred. And he wasn't even satisfied with winning the fight. He had to go jump over the cage and go after Conor's coaches. So it's interesting to see culturally how people deal with smack talk. But there's other ways to get in their head. And in your book, you sort of talk about the nonverbal ways too.
Well, I mean, we do it every day. And I think that's one of the interesting things because with Blade, you kind of have to do it because all the power elements and the just overpowering people thing gets taken out of the equation. So you have to get a lot smarter and a lot trickier. Like you got to use all the other things that are on the table, right? You just can't rely on, I'm just going to take a few on the way in and grab hold of them and shake them to death. It's like there's danger. There's too much danger not to. But yeah, I mean, smack talk is great. You can insult people. Of course, like you said, sometimes that's very dangerous because if somebody very angry can make mistakes, but they're also very dangerous, right? But body language, what do you got? This kind of thing. That's really good. You can look down. It's like, well, you missed, mate. Or you're like, you can draw people out in different ways. The stupid one of the looking over the shoulder thing totally works. I mean, it's ridiculous how many people fall for that. If we're kind of suddenly talking and I suddenly go silent, often you'll kind of have a break. So any change in the base level of stuff, we can be super going fast and suddenly I'll slow down. It's like there's a moment of recalibration. It's OODA loop stuff, really.
Yeah.
What's going on? Or if we're going really super slow, then I'll suddenly sort of like do like a like this kind of thing. You know, it depends. And again, everybody's level of perception is going to be different. If I'm working with a beginner, they're not going to see all the tiny stuff, you know, but if I'm working with somebody really high skilled, it's really, really dependent. You know, it's like, you know, are they going to like work with a twitch? Is that going to mean something? If I smile at them, is that going to be something? You know, I can create tells that you think are tells too.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like
You
playing
know, so
poker.
yeah, exactly. It's like poker is exactly a great analogy. It's like, are you playing the person, the hand, or the table, or you know, their hand, your hand, them, or the table, right? It's like there's all these different aspects to it that people don't think. They think it's just one-on-one, but there's actually a lot of different fights going on that you can, you know, wind your way in on. It's like, do I want to draw you? Do I want to keep you out? Do I want to make you think that you almost got something, and if you try it again, that would be great? Because if you do that, then I know exactly where you're going to be next, right? Sonny would do it all the time, where you just kind of miss. He'd just like pull his belly out the way, and you just miss, and you'll be all like, missed, guaranteed you're going to go for it straight away again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really stupid, but we're built like that. We're kind of, you know, we're built. We have social status issues as human beings. You know, we want to win. We don't like to lose. We don't like to be smack talked to sometime, or we want to feel victorious, you know, or maybe you want to look as though, you know, you're losing, and it's like, oh no, please don't come and get me. And somebody's like, all right, now I got them. Right. So they let their guard down and they become more stupid. You know, all I want to do is make the other person predictable. That's all.
The majority. Yeah. Now you become the puppet master.
Yeah.
The majority of the fighting that I do is impact weapon stuff. So I call it taking attitudes. I borrowed the term from Musashi, but I don't like when he says attitude, he sort of means the way that you stand. Like you adopt the low attitude with the sword, or the high attitude, or the side, whatever. But I look at it as literally like the persona you're projecting. For me, I put a fencing mask on, so my face goes away, right? So you can still sort of see, especially if the mask isn't painted, you can still sort of see some features. But, you know, if you're going to become this faceless thing, your body language does become more important. And I was talking to one of my Zoom students last night, who's someone who I've fought before. And he said he was like, well, you know, you just became very relentless, like this very almost Michael Myers-esque thing. You kept just coming forward. And he's like, I became afraid to start swinging. He's like, and the one time I hit you, he goes, you just stopped and shook your head and then came forward. And I've learned that stuff from guys that I'm afraid of. I'm like, oh, you know, it's really intimidating when you hit a guy and he just goes, no.
Yeah, no.
And it keeps coming in. But
Well,
I had said, oh, sorry.
No, exactly. No, I was just going to agree with you, because in boxing, you'll get like the guys, that's why they stand up real quick, do a quick dance, or they'll smile when they get hit, you know, same.
Yeah. Well, sometimes guys will smile when they get hit to throw you off because it hurt.
Yeah,
they'll be like, shit, that was hard. Good try. I'm like, please don't do that again. But I have other people where I have to counter fight against. If I do that, they'll go, okay. And then we wind up in this. And even with impact weapons, my first day of Dog Brothers fighting, I lost this entire piece off my hand. That's from
look at that.
A rattan stick through a heavy glove. And I tell people a lot of the times who wear the big padded suits, like, I'll take those things off. Rattan's not really that dangerous. But I make sure to not show them this right off the bat. It's like, oh, sometimes it is. But because of all the impact weapon fighting, it really puts you in that, like, I'll take your little hit. But if I took that same fight that I had with Michael, where, you know, we barely knew each other at that time. He kind of only knew me by reputation, and his teacher is a full dog brother. And so we do that to guys that train with us, is we'll build up our buddies to sort of get in their head, you know, to give them that, like, okay, you're going to be afraid of this person. How do you respond to it? And I wouldn't have I still might have been able to project a little more of aggression on him with a blade, but I would have still had to have been much more conscious, because that one little hit he got, with a stick, I can go, no. Or if you punch me and it doesn't really hurt, I go, no. But if you stick this much of a knife in me, I'm not going to shake my head. and
Well-
act tough about it. Or maybe I would, but now I'm
Well-
going, shit, I'm bleeding.
Well, there's two aspects, right? And I think everybody should be warned about this, is that when people see red, they can become very stupid and irrational. It's like you'll see it over and over again where it's like, oh, you got me, whoom, right?
Yeah.
You'll see it in some of those crazy machete fights on the street where they're both going at each other, right? And so it's not, there's definitely something that you've got to remember, that there's people that aren't rational. I remember Sonny always saying, it's like you want to pick chunks out of people, like you don't want to close, you know. But every time you cut something, you're like, dude, you're bleeding, dude. You have to actually tell them stuff. And there's, you know, it's like you got to point it out to them that they're really hurt. Otherwise, sometimes people can't get out of that mode where they'll just die killing you, you know. Like they're definitely like a very not smart part of the brain that will just take over just to win, and it doesn't understand. It's one of the things I put in my book, that, you know, the monkey dance fighting out in nature isn't lethal between animals.
Right.
And the real problem with humans is we created this weapon that can kill people, but we still, that monkey dance chemistry that gets in a face-to-face conflict doesn't understand that we're actually in lethal mode now. Like a punch is actually a stab now.
Right. We should be having a social conflict, and we've taken it into asocial.
Right. And it isn't asocial because we're pretending like it's social and non-lethal and acting like it is, and just kind of taking all kinds of cuts just to win, which is daft. You know, if you kind of understand what a knife does, you're a bit more smart around it, right?
Right.
I mean, but there's definitely something to watch out for. It's like you can't play with some people because the smartness isn't there. But again, if the, you know, like Sonny's system has, like, everybody's all like, what's the lethal cut? You got to take it out immediately. It's like, well, maybe you don't. Maybe you actually have to impair the other person so they can't freaking carry on. So, you know, blood in the eyes, you know, if your guts are falling out, they can't get chased. You take out knees so they can't actually walk on their feet. Does that make sense? It's like everybody's super, you know, obsessed with, you got to stab people because it's the only way to kill them. And it's like, well, no, you know, but that, you know, it's like, yeah, I get that. It's a completely different set of, it's like, the goal there is very, very different, because that's more assassination stuff. It's like, my job is to kill. It's a very different thing than Sonny's stuff, which is self-defense, you know, and challenge match related also, is that I actually want to live through this. I want to, you know, tomorrow is important, you know, and it's like, okay, so maybe I've got a cut, but you know, my training kicked in such a way that I took as little damage as I needed to end this. And ending it can literally be that they can't see. You know what I mean? So that you can bail, or they're holding their guts in their stomach. Sorry, it got very gory.
No, that's all right. And I really like the concept of, and this isn't something that I'd really thought before, but being like, hey man, you're bleeding. Because I've been taught, both through martial arts and through EMS training, to never ignore blood, especially your own. And in that moment where maybe the person doesn't know they're bleeding, may possibly just bringing that to their attention will maybe either bring the consequences home more, make them realize like, ooh, I am vulnerable to this person or whatever, you know, or it just might be another part of the mind fuck that could be going on in the fight of like, haha, you're bleeding. Like,
yeah,
you're
and
of course bleeding.
Yeah, I mean, and of course that involves having the space to have that be a possibility. You just kind of back off somebody like, dude, you're going to be fucking dead. You need to deal with that. Look, you know, you go to hospital if you leave now, but you're going to be dead. I mean, like you can, but there's a spatial element to that, obviously. So, you know, when you get into like more real life scenarios, it sort of changes. But if we kind of reel it back into what Sonny was teaching, our goal is not to die in our system. Our goal is not to punish somebody else or to kill somebody else. Our job is to live through the interaction as unscathed as possible for tomorrow. It's like I'm leaving. I need to deal with the threat, and I'm leaving. And that you know, that has the possibility of it going super bad, but that doesn't change the goal. You know, and I think competitive fighting is really good because you get to face threats, but the goal is very different. In the first book I wrote about, you know, I wrote kind of an imaginary piece where you're pitted against another person, and it's your job you're both going for the same object that's at the end of the field to grab it. And whoever gets there first is the winner. And everybody's like, all right, well, you just run at the object. Well, maybe, but what happens if the person next to you is runs faster than you? Maybe you just run at them. Does it make sense? Maybe you'd nobble them first. It's like, what happens if whoever loses dies? Maybe you run faster, but they're stronger, but you know they're coming for you. How do you run then? You know,
I kick him while he's picking it up.
Good, and then you can kind of get it. But if just touching it is first, does that make sense? It's like before you start, you actually have to have your tactic plan. It's like, I know this person runs faster than me, or I know they're stronger than me, even though I'm faster. You know, if somebody's going to just intercept you because that's the way, you know, that's the only way they can prevent you from touching the thing. It's like, you've got to start thinking that way. It's like, you know, and if you imagine that this object is your life and whoever touches it is your life, it's like, it's very, very different way of thinking than, oh, I'll get some points, or I will, you know, I'll do the victory dance around you and point and go, I won and you didn't. Right? It's a different mindset. And the sword cleans everything up, I think, because of that. You know, I think it's a very interesting pursuit, even though, when am I going to get into a sword fight on the street? I hope never, you know, yay.
Right. But, hopefully never.
But it gives you that mindset that's a very different mindset from other stuff.
Right. California actually is an interesting case because of the law about being allowed to openly carry a blade as long as you're not concealing it.
Fixed blade, as long as it's visible. Yeah.
Yeah. So here in Fresno, we've got a population of people that are very fond of a synthetic stimulant that leads them to homelessness and other erratic behavior. And something that I've seen a lot of around here is machetes. Guys with them either strapped on their bike handles or their packs or whatever. So the possibility of running into a long blade is actually there. It's real. I don't carry a machete around town. I carry a knife, but I might have some other answers in the moment if I needed them, that I don't talk about because it's not exactly carried openly. But you know, the idea that the sword is now obsolete that's not exactly correct. And especially now that we've seen a year of interesting interactions between human beings, the possibility of someone pulling out a sword, a machete, or some sort of a longer blade is absolutely real. The possibility of defending your home with one is absolutely real. And you know, other parts of the world, you don't have to go far from America, just down to Mexico, before blade culture really starts to come back in. You know, parts of this country, we do sort of have blade culture, but other parts, people are very uncomfortable with it. And I actually think that Filipino martial arts, in terms of swordsmanship, is the modern equivalent to the things that our ancestors would have been doing in Europe or other parts of the world with their longer swords. And for me, I've kind of made jokes about when I came to Filipino martial arts, it was because the HEMA guys at the time, all I was seeing was like pear-shaped guys with balding ponytails and lace-up shirts. That's not necessarily really the case. And I'm sorry to anybody I angered. I know a couple people were like, hey, fuck you, man, when I said that a couple weeks ago. But, you know, that stuff is lost and is being reclaimed by these guys, and that's awesome. I mean, you can see I've got a picture of a Messer fight about to happen over my shoulder. But for those of us in the modern world, the thing that has continued to live is this blade style from the Philippines. And having Sonny leave early is a big loss, but it's not as if the last man to use a bolo is gone.
Oh no, they're still at it. They're absolutely still at it.
Actively still at it, especially in the parts of the Philippines where the religious conflict and stuff like that is going on. I'm trying really hard to just avoid, like I said before, the modern politics of any of it, and being like, well, there is this Islamic faction in the part and the this and that. And we'll leave that part.
Yeah, but I will say that these old traditions that are very traditional, tribal, I mean, the fact that they just happen to be Islamic is kind of a byproduct. everything. But that the arts of, you know, Mindanao have been there for a really, really long time, and they've been using them for a really, really long time. You know, the slave trade, you know, up and down the Filipino coast, you know, the pirates. A lot of them came from Mindanao. You know, it's like everybody was at it. The Chinese, the Japanese, the Philippines. It's like we don't need to get like racist here. It's like everybody was at it. That was what the world was. So there was a lot of piracy on the high seas. There was a lot of trade in people. There was a lot of trade in spices and all kinds of other things. The Brits were at it. You know, everybody was at it.
No, right? The British?
They're huge pirates. You know, so it's kind of cool that because of closed cultures that this stuff actually does survive, and it does survive within the closed cultures. Of course, the bad part is if we want to gain access to it, we can't because we're not from there, you know. So in some ways it's secret, but the information's still there, you know. It's not like it's died, because they still use it. The barong is a status symbol. You carry it around because that's what being a man is. And so of course everybody, you know, who carries and trains it, you know. So even though it's kind of weird and dark and not very nice, and you know, it's caused a lot of violence, in a sense, the information isn't dead. You know, I think it is in a lot of places. I mean, everybody's still having to defend themselves in the Philippines because it's lawless, you know, and to a certain extent, that's why the blade culture survives still there, you know, pretty strongly. And there's still challenge matches because, to be frank, they like fighting. You know what I mean? Like it's a culture that this is important, like your honor and, you know, what you got and all this kind of stuff and your status.
It's hard to explain to people that don't like to fight, but like, no, I'm pretty willing. Like, if you want to do it, like, yeah, let's go. Like, I could be at work and it could be friendly. And if someone was like, yeah, man, I'll fight you right now, I'd be like, I need a 15-minute break. If you like to fight, you just like to do it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be out of anger. In that culture, the challenge matches, I know there's another level to it beyond that, but
there's definitely another level to it. It's darker. And, you know, the other thing you have to also realize is that not everybody is going to follow your rules. So you know, going to a different culture and sort of, you know, you could do it in your own culture, Matt, but I don't know about, you know, I would be very, I would say to people, don't go to the Philippines to try and do this.
No. Well, that actually, when you say it like that within my own culture, so I'm 3,000 miles away from where I grew up right now. And in most parts of the world, that means you're in another country, and the culture will change. And it's been a big change for me coming to California, because I joke about it, but I can't do that here, because someone will either call the police or shoot me. They don't have that at all where I am in California. In Fresno, if I were to really get up into somebody's face enough, I see that as being the one of two options: is someone might die, or like the police are going to be involved, because that casual, like, hey, fuck you, have a nice day, doesn't exist here.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, and I think fisticuffs, you know, take it out back and have a bit of a brawl in the parking lot outside the bar has kind of gone away as a way to sort of like sort things out, which is a shame. I think that's actually fairly universal. I suspect Boston, it's slightly easier to be insulting because everybody's insulting and you just take it.
We're all dicks.
Well, you know, the Brits are the same way, and the Irish. Everybody's shit talking all the time. It's much more European. So
I was gonna say, if you look at the people that moved to Boston from Europe, that's generally it's Italian, a lot of Italian, Irish, Scottish, English. It's most of my lineage. That actually brings up another thing, because we've mentioned culture a couple of times, and this is something I know you've answered questions about what it's like to be a woman in the martial arts, but as an Anglo person in the Filipino martial arts, I have a student who's a Filipina who has joked a couple of times, why do I keep learning my cultural art from white guys? But do you ever feel like a cold shoulder from anyone? Or I never have, but I'm in a very insular version, you know what I mean? Like, I exist in the Dog Brothers sphere, and for me, it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, take your fucking padded shirt off and let's do this. That does not exist in all of Filipino martial arts. Do you ever feel that kind of like
oh yeah, sure. I mean, you know, for positive and negative reasons. So historically, the Filipinos came to America They were suffered a lot of racism. They're very insular culture. You know, they weren't really accepted. They worked in the fields. They trained secretly amongst themselves so that they could protect themselves against the white Americans, right? It's like they kept it with it in-house for a really long time. And then it was only when Adrian Cabales started teaching slightly more widely, you know, around that era, that others who were non-Filipino got let in. And any teacher at that time who took in non-Filipinos got in trouble with all their friends. I mean, it wasn't an easy thing. Sonny, the same. I mean, I know some of his first non-Filipino students, and they were just like, oh yeah, you know, you had to run the gauntlet of all his friends out in the living room to get out to the patio, and they're all smoking in there. And it was, he got into real trouble about it. But his thought was that he was sharing something culturally to people that wanted it, which meant that the pride of having that from the Philippines was going to live, right? Because these people wanted to train. And he really wanted to teach people that wanted to train. You know, and I think there's part of that generational thing too. You know, that maybe a younger generation coming to a foreign country they just aren't very interested in their old kind of like old fashioned stuff, what granddad does or what dad does. It's like, that's not cool. So there might also have been an aspect of, you know, some Filipino kids that didn't even know it existed or just didn't think it was cool or whatever it was, right? So it's almost like there's this transitional generation of people looking for something exotic. You know, I grew up, you know, Bruce Lee and all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, oh my God, that stuff's really, really cool. You know, I first started doing Bagua in 1986. I was like, oh yeah, this is the deal, man. This is like, ooh, mystic. We're going around in circles, you know, because it was cool, you know, but HEMA didn't exist. And I didn't even think about the fact that there was historic European martial arts. I mean, I knew Errol Flynn, but I didn't know anybody teaching it. There was Olympic fencing and that was it. And I didn't want to do Olympic fencing. I did it a little bit when I was a kid, but I didn't carry on with it. So then, you know, so there's an interest, there's a passion for something. And maybe it has to through our generation to get, you know, back into a lot of Filipinos carrying on the culture, right? So Greg and Jay certainly are doing that. But if you look at pictures of our generation of Sunny students, it's like, you know, of the people that kind of trained is our small group. There's like a couple African-American guys, a couple Filipino guys, and there's kind of like me, you know, and I'm the token minority in the picture, right? Yeah. And that's great, right? Because it's the Bay Area there in one photo, you know. It's brilliant in a way. I mean, I love that it's so multicultural at my level. But then to actually answer your question, it's like, yeah, nobody's going to take me seriously. Who wants to learn from a girl? And who wants to learn from a white girl? Do you know what I mean? Like, say, I don't have shit. You know, I'm not like, I'm a Navy SEAL. Please come and train with me. Or I'm like this super badass Filipino guy that, you know, is just amazing with a sword. It's like, I'm not that. I can't ever be that. You know, I think when you start training, you don't actually think about your role as who you are or your validity in being able to pass something on. So it wasn't important to me. It was the fact that he took me on as a student. That was it, end of, right? But he did want everybody to teach. So I'm really doing it because I'm duty bound to do it. He asked, and so I'm gonna. You know, there's no two ways, but I also know my limitations into how much access I have to getting students and people who want to train. You know, so I do my part, like I've done the books, I've done the video series, you know, because that'll be my contribution to keeping this stuff alive. And, you know, hopefully I'll keep doing more. I'm very lucky in that I have some very high people that think what I do is really good. And most of my students come because Crafty Dog Mark Denny met Sonny and he met us. And so he was like, oh yeah, this shit's great, right? It's interesting, it's fascinating. These guys are cool. So there's one tick, you know, I'm friends with Rory Miller, I'm friends with Ed Calderon, I'm friends with all these people. They're like, that shit's cool, I want to learn some. And that's the trickle down effect that I get, is that somebody else thinks is cool thinks I'm cool. And that's usually the connection. And that's good enough for me. I think
that's life. I think that's
absolutely.
Life.
But you know, people. if I was, you know, had the picture and the whatever and the, you know, I don't have that sort of image that somebody's going to think I'm dangerous and want to come and learn some shit, which is great. No. Because can I say the positive part of that is, I do not attract idiots. You know, I tend not to attract a whole crew of people that want to knife fight. which is patently ridiculous thing to want to do.
Don't know anybody like that. I've never met those people.
But you know what I mean? Like, I don't get the, hey, I want to learn how to knife fight. Can I teach? It's like, no, I don't teach knife fighting. It's also why I'm very, very specific about teaching sword, because it cuts out most people because they're like, sword's stupid. So I'm like, okay, sword's stupid. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's self-selecting. Yeah, it's self-selecting. And so there's a positive also to being somebody, wrong for the part, if you like that doesn't look the part or act the part or, advertise in the way that I do. It saves me also from a lot of bullshit that I'm very happy for.
Have you ever had to nix somebody after meeting and training with them a couple of times? I recently had to do it for the first time. Some stuff came up and I've had a couple of people that asked me questions or said things that I was like, oh yeah, we're not doing this. And I was able to kind of disengage. But have you ever had someone that you started working with and then you realize like, I do not feel comfortable teaching this person, or do you kind of filter that out quickly?
Well, I think there's a natural filter. The two limitations I think is like, yes, I have stopped teaching people that I have found out what their online personalities are like or something, and you're just like, oh yeah, this isn't a good fit, and then I'm just never available, so it's really easy not to have them turn up, and the other one is that some people can't listen, so I am not in a position where if somebody won't do what I ask them to do, that I can keep teaching them. I've had people where I'm just like, I'm hitting your hand, you've got to not let me do that. It's like, yeah. I'm just like, you're not going to learn anything if you let me do this all the time. Yeah. And you do it for a couple of months and you're just like, you're not listening to what I'm telling you. You're not, it's like every time we're working on something, you try and tag my hand, so I cut yours off. It's just like, you're not focusing. And because of who I am, obviously it's impossible for you. So you need to find somebody else who you can listen to.
Right.
And do it. So, student teacher, there's a two-way thing. Some people resonate with how I teach and some people just don't. They need to go train with somebody else or do something else, right? It's not for everybody. Even Sonny lost a bunch of students.
Yeah.
It's not like everybody that came to him stayed. He filtered everybody out. Well, that my ringer story of getting rid of people at the beginning.
Yeah.
People also didn't like the fact that there was no belts. You didn't know if you were getting better. It was frustrating all the time. You felt like an idiot, like twice a week for hours on end. It's like that only suits certain people where you don't know where you are and how you're doing.
Some people really need the attaboy to want to keep going. And if you don't get that, enough of this. We see that sometimes in Dog Brothers when people don't ascend at the rate they think they should or whatever. But it's fun. From the stories I've heard about training with Sonny, I could see people getting frustrated and being like, this isn't what I want. You know what I mean? And going and finding a place where they were going to get there. Oh, you've been paying your tuition for 6 months. Here's your stripe or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing to hold on to at Sonny's. There really wasn't, and I just think that some people just didn't like that. I mean, and also learning not to use your power or like have to insert your personality into everything you do requires a certain level of vulnerability and a lack of ego that's really hard for some people to lose. You know what I mean? Like they can't help themselves to have to win, and we all go through it. I'm not like perfect. I went through like a year or a year and a half of like being a dick too, right? But it's either something that you get over or you don't. Yeah. If you're constantly looking for the shot to be all like, woohoo, you're not going to get the stuff, the rest of it, because you're too tunnel visioned on like one aspect. It's like, yeah, you got that. Now stick that aside. Now let's learn some of the other things. Because everything has a cost. And so ego is huge. It's like being able to sort of just let that go. And the psychology part that we were also talking about, it's actually vital to not be yourself when you're trying to play other people, because you've got to get in their heads. You can't really, you know what I mean? Like there's a whole bunch of acting skills in a way that you need to develop. And whether that acting is looking frightened or looking, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people don't want to look scared ever. They don't want to look, they don't want to back up. They don't want to, show things that, you know, they don't want to not be who they are. They don't want to impose their identity on what they're doing. And that is also very hard for some people. So that knocks a bunch out too.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, no, I feel like that's a part of the brilliance of some fighters is their ability to take on what they need rather than constantly be projecting what they feel inside. You know, like the ego thing, especially for, you know, I can speak as being a young male that was looking for that sort of thing. You know, for me, coming to Dog Brothers off of coming from an entire life of contact sports, like I'm not a big guy, but I'm pretty rugged. I've been doing that stuff. So that idea of just getting in there and doing the ram fighting for a lot of guys that's we can't help it. And
yeah,
over time I've developed, well, it's fun. I mean, but especially with the rattan sticks, like occasionally you do get hurt, like you break some bones. And as much as we get pride out of, you know, holding up your side and having 4 or 5 bloody stick hickeys from, you know, a guy hitting you hard, well, yeah, if that's a sword, you're dead. If that's a baseball bat, like your ribs are destroyed. I've had the good fortune of having suffered a bunch of injuries that have never left me with anything too lasting, but like I understand what it is to be hurt. And so as part of developing as a fighter, like I said, taking on different attitudes has become important. And that is kind of an ego thing, especially if you do start to score, you know, kind of wanting to get back into your like attitude versus like, no, keep drawing him in, like you're scoring, keep doing it. He's not hitting you. Yeah, you are just getting his hand. Yeah, you are just getting his arm. Or, oh yeah, you did just get a leg shot. Well, if we're in a fight to the death, that leg shot, now I have the choice to just leave.
Yes,
like
exactly.
you've said, and I assume it's a paraphrase or maybe even a direct quote from Sonny, like the art isn't in the killing, the art is in the not dying part of it.
He said that's the hard part. I mean, if you really think about it, if I was like coming to assassinate you, my only real skill set I'd need is to be able to creep up close enough to you without you noticing me, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's like actually killing you with a knife is not hard.
No.
It's like literally I just have to walk towards you. I mean, that's it. You know, there's no art in that, you know. And then of course, if you're armed too and I don't care about dying, that's pretty easy too. Right? It's like I you know, dying requires no practice, as Sonny would say. You know, it's like just happens naturally.
Line. I like that.
You know, it's like the part that you, if you care that you actually do everything you do in martial arts is because you want to get away, or you want to be the last one standing, or whatever it is, right? It's like to be there afterwards. What is it you need? You know, and of course, I mean that's what martial arts are for. You know, there's a reason why there's not that many martial arts in armed forces training. You know, it's last desperate measure shit, you know, where you haven't, you know, achieved your objective yet and you're freaking down to it, right? But mostly it's about getting a whole bunch of people walking towards the enemy and taking them out. You know, there's no skill in that. Right. You know, back in the day when none of the firearms were very accurate, it was pure luck.
Right. You literally lined up and just hoped enough of your musket balls made it across the gap. Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a big part of why the blade is still so terrifying and why bayonet charges broke most battles. You know, you see movies like The Patriot where you get a bayonet charge where like, then everyone fights with bayonets for a minute. Like motherfuckers ran away.
Yeah.
You had a bunch of guys sprinting at you with blades this long at the end of a stick, screaming, and you're like trying desperately to reload this gun that might not even shoot, or it might blow up in your face. Then you're blind while some guy's running at. No, get out of there, man.
Well, but you know, at least in the British Army, I don't know what it is in the US Army, but you know, back in the day where that was more of a thing than modern times, it was like you had the officer at the front was the guy who had to lead people into battle. And in the UK at the time, they believed only gentlemen, like people that from the landed gentry, could be officers.
So
and the
some
reason
poor guy who didn't move his lower jaw was like, charge!
Well, their only quality was this idea of honor and status, which meant that they could lead. Like you don't need much. I mean, to actually do that and be like running at the front. So that was the officer's job. Sergeant Major was at the back to shoot anybody that turned and ran. Right. So
he was the guy that worked for a living.
Yeah, and he was usually enlisted, right? And he was some tough son of a bitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his whole job was to be at the back, and if anybody turned and ran, he'd shoot him.
It was
You know?
scarier to deal with Sergeant Major than it was to run after the
Right.
noble lieutenant.
It's like the noble lieutenant's going, I guess we got to go too, if
Yeah.
that idiot's running, right? But then, the running away part, most people forget that was a big thing,
Oh yeah. Run
and the not running
away!
away, the not running away was what gave you the steal, and that was
Yeah.
obviously working together and stuff.
Yeah. Well,
But yeah,
anybody that's read The Charge of the Light Brigade knows sometimes you should have run away.
well, but there was a British TV program, I can't remember what it was now, but it was going around various regimental kind of mess halls, and they always have like this big glorious painting of some victory from back in the day on the wall, and it's usually a defeat. The guy was like pointing out that it's usually like the last stand, or the charge of the Light Brigade, or something where it's just like ridiculously heroic and possibly went badly. It's never like, oh, that was easy, boys, and we won. The painting is never that. It's the grit and the sort of like the steel inside that they
remember the Alamo.
Yeah, exactly.
Not like remember that time we shot all those guys who were running away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That one's not usually the glorious. When realistically, like maybe that was the good one,
Right, exactly.
Like,
but nobody knows about the things that go easy, right? It's like you celebrate the quality that will make people run towards cannon. Because that's the quality that you want, and there's still a self-selecting process, right, in the armed forces for special forces. It's like that's the person that you need to be. So that's what they're celebrating, is that quality of character. I think
that, and it's a lot easier to convince 18-year-olds than 37-year-olds.
Oh, absolutely.
It'd be real hard to convince me at this point. Like, how accurate is that Sergeant Major with that pistol? He's only got one shot too, right?
It's like, all right, chaps, I think we can take him, all three of us, right? Let's
He can only shoot one of us, guys.
That's time, exactly.
Yeah. But that's something that I think in the modern era we have, Call of Duty and video games and stuff.
But there's no price. Nobody's got the cost. This is what I think is the real problem. I mean, it's one of the things that's great about Dog Brothers is that you can get your knuckles broken, or your elbow broken, or whatever. It's like there is
your
cost.
Face split open. I mean, I've seen kneecaps busted open.
Yeah. There's a cost.
Yep. Crushed, especially because of the style of fighting we do. When the fencing masks come off, we don't stop fighting. The worst injury I've seen was actually a crushed eye socket from an elbow. The incident has stuff behind it, but that one was pretty bad. I actually took an aluminum knife directly into my ear in my second gathering. So this was gathering one. Second gathering was, if you've ever met Yo-Dog, Ryan Achenbach, he looks like Asian Vin Diesel. He's about my height, but he's probably about 200 pounds, and his biceps are like this. And I had managed to pull his head down for a tie clinch. He pulled a knife. He pulled a knife and went over his head. So he didn't see what he did. He didn't know. Right in my ear, it split the conch all the way into the canal, and it broke my transmandibular joint, cracked my TMJ. So
oh shit,
broken jaw and stitches in my ear canal. So
yikes. So there's cost, is it?
There can be cost. There can be cost for sure, and
that's why I think it's you actually learn something.
Yes, absolutely. I learned several things, including
you might have a knife.
yeah, and it's not fun to have an inner ear injury and then have to fly back to Boston from LA.
That's really unpleasant.
Yeah, that sucked. But
Call of Duty, you get all the joy and the glory and none of the pain. And I think people forget that. And I think that's the thing, if we go back to sort of blade work and swords particularly, nobody treats trainers like the real thing. Everybody treats a training gun as though it's the real thing. Swords should be taught more like firearms. It's like your behavior around your training sword should be the same as a training gun in a scenario, so that when you have a real one in your hand, you behave in exactly the same way. Otherwise you're losing most of the problem. If you give a live sword to somebody and they start just whacking it around, you're just like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, they're not getting another one, that's for sure.
Yeah, and if somebody doesn't have the respect for something that can kill so easily, then they don't have the maturity level to really manage it. you know. And I think that even training blades should be used in a similar manner. I mean, swords particularly, just for the danger potential. I mean, you know, if you do, I did Toyama Betodo for a while, which is really lovely. It's a really interesting art. It's very, very cool. But when you get to the live blade stuff, actually resheathing it and taking it out is actually the most dangerous part. And it's funny when you finally have a live weapon in one hand and you've actually got to put it in the sheath. You're just all like, oh, holy shit, this is actually really, really dangerous. So you get that real appreciation for what it actually is.
Yeah.
So it's useful to be around like real swords like it is around real firearms, just to get that.
Because I have swords, knives, machetes, and stuff kicking around in my house, that's something I tend to show people when they first come over is sword etiquette. Like little stuff, and I make it like not like, hey man, this is something you can kill people with. It's killed a lot of people in history. But like, hey, this is how you be polite when, you know, you encounter a sword. I had that taught to me. I think actually probably, I think the person to give him credit would have been Sean Zerger, who's Wandering Dog out of Toronto. Anyone who's ever had the opportunity to be around Sean or train with Sean or anything like that, would say nothing but great things about him. He's an awesome guy, but probably the first time he had me at his house, which was very early in my dog brother's experience, actually, he taught me about like, okay, well, if there's, you know, a sword that you'd like to check out, pick up, whatever, this is how you take it out. You know, you ask, you know, don't start picking up people's shit and taking it out.
No.
There you go. That's like walking into, the Stick Chick actually had a great breakdown about this interaction between JKD guy and this sort of backyard kung fu school where this guy misbehaved in every possible way you could. And this teacher kept it together for so long. But the moment he went from being like, okay, we're not even, like, he all of a sudden, like, his ghetto turned on. It was cool to watch because I knew what was coming right away. As soon as this guy got disrespectful with him, but he started doing little things like if you walk into a new school, don't just start kicking their bags.
No.
Don't just right. Yeah, your face right away. You're like, no, of course not. But some people are not taught that, the etiquette of how to handle going into those situations. They're like, well, we're in this school, so I'm gonna just take, oh, this is a cool thing, and just start whipping around, like, bro, that's a sharp sword. Put that down. Or this is cool. I like this. Is it sharp? Like,
yeah, it's like getting a firearm and going,
right. Or even just like, I mean, this has coating on it, which is why I'm doing it, but get your fingers off my fucking steel. Like,
well, don't touch it.
I'm gonna have to clean that, man. Like, you know, don't touch, just in general, don't touch it. Exactly. Don't like, is this thing loaded? Like, please stop. Please stop. Hey, how's this? Is this uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Please stop. I don't even like pointing a finger at someone.
I know, right?
Like, please stop. Yeah. I do this. That's my move.
But you saw the walls of Sonny's house were covered in stuff.
Yeah.
And on very, very occasional, somebody would come in and go, and I'd be like, you know, it's like
everyone in the room's like,
you know, it's like you don't, especially into a Filipino guy's house, because that's a challenge. That's like, let's go, motherfucker. I mean, you know, it's like, it's not just mildly embarrassing in certain schools or disrespectful. This is like, we're on now. It's like, you're done. Now you need to leave and exit backwards out very, very carefully.
Yeah. It's like you came in and kicked my dog. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Whoa, get ready. Here it comes.
You know?
Yeah. And you know, a good teacher won't immediately respond to that badly, but they'll immediately begin to give off signs that you need to change your behavior.
Well, you're done. Some teachers like that.
Some people don't have that. Yeah, I don't consider myself a good teacher. You come into my home and do enough things. Oh yeah, no, I mean, I won't even tell you we're fighting. Like, you're in my house at that point. But you know, and but for other people, especially if you recognize this person doesn't know, hey man, this is how this works. And then you can gauge based on their behavior where you need to go from there. But when you have someone who comes in, my school, my style, this is why you're doing it wrong. And like, at this point, their safety is based on your patience. And
it is.
Yeah, and I think I actually learned this phrase from Rory Miller in the video that the stick chick had put up. The guy got an educational beatdown that was delivered in a way that actually was, I was like, the teacher did a good job. The first thing he did was a double slap. He didn't hit his ears. He got his face. I don't know if he was going for his ears, but I don't think so, because
that would be bad.
I think that would have really damaged the guy. But he double clapped him, and then proceeded to just like hammer fists to the side. The guy tried to do some stuff, hit him a couple of times in the face, but then when he stopped, the dude jumped up and tried to kick him in the head. And he threw a real half-assed kick. I was like, dude, if that was my kick, I would never go to another school, start talking shit and trying. But he threw this very like just angry boy try and face kick, and he missed. And at that point, I actually expected it to get even worse, and it didn't. Now the other students and the teacher, and they removed the guy from the situation, and he did a bunch of woofing on his way out the door. But I mean, he was in a backyard with a fence. That could have gone a lot worse. I mean, that could have turned into a group stomping, and like maybe you don't get out of there. So when you enter into one of those situations with people don't understand sometimes. When you enter into a situation with some other people that are skilled with violence, everyone is their safety is sort of on the forbearance of everyone else. And that's something people, when I tell them there's no rules in a dog brother fight, they go,
yeah, there's rules.
Well, then why don't people do? I know there's rules, but we say there's no rules. The rule is be friends at the end. Well, that actually is a lot of rules.
Yeah.
Be friends at the end encompasses a lot of rules, and it changes the rules from fight to fight.
Yeah.
Because some of these guys that I am close friends with, I'll do some kind of messed up stuff to them, and vice versa. I've had hammer fists to my crotch when I've been on the bottom. Thank you, Robert, you dick. But like, we're friends. We were immediately still good friends, but there's other people where like, hey man, why'd you kick me in the balls? Like, what was that about? The dynamic changes, person to person. But in that regard of no rules, friends at the end of the day, there's 40 guys here that are here to fight in a challenge-based situation. If you do something fucked up, somebody else is immediately going to come over and be like, hey man, do you want to fight? Because I'm the only person you can fight next. And then that will get increasingly more terrifying as time goes on. We don't have a designated guy anymore, but there's been eras that there's been a guy.
The guy, yeah.
The guy. At this point, there's several the guys that could step in, but because we've grown as an organization, at least within the US, I can't speak for, I can kind of, because I've been to 9 of the 10 Canadian gatherings, and being from Boston, I'm much closer to Montreal than to LA. There's not really that atmosphere there, because I don't think within Philip's umbrella you're going to do that anyway, because good God, you might have to deal with Phil and he's just going to stab you at that point. Sled dog Phil Jelena is no longer interested, I don't think, in butting. He'll still get out there and do it at his age. He still straps on the fencing mask and mixes it up with younger guys. But I don't think you'd have very long to think about what you'd done.
Yeah, and in a way that's very old-fashioned. I mean, I've never been to the Philippines. I never really went because I never thought that I was actually going to get anything really real, and what I got was really good anyway, so there was no real point in going. I mean, I'd love to go visit because it looks like an incredibly beautiful place, but it was never like on the top of my list. But I heard that you got to be kind of careful when you walk into these schools, because if you walk in like some shit, they'll say, okay, well, why don't you fight somebody? And they'll give you one of the low-level students, and if you win, they'll give you somebody higher. And the problem is, if you keep winning and you embarrass them, and once you leave, they'll come and chase you, and they'll probably just rob you and leave you for dead. It's like, you don't get to win this. You're not going there to suddenly be all like, oh my God, that guy's so amazing. You've got to understand that there's a culture. At some point, you need to lose, because otherwise, why are you there trying to learn anything? Now you've just been super disrespectful for the school.
Yeah, and everybody hates you.
And everyone hates you. And, if you embarrass the school, they will come and take revenge. There's no, you know, you kind of got to, again, that goes down to the ego part, that it's not necessarily about the winning. You know, it's about your personality and your ability to learn, engage, and read the room, if you like, right? So that's a huge part of it too. I mean, you know, fighting is so interesting. I think there's definitely codes that some people have and some people really don't, and the people that have tend to have a longer career or a longer, you know, they last in it much longer.
Well, having, you know, people will look at their martial arts career in so many different ways. And, you know, within the Dog Brothers, our saying is to walk as a warrior for all of your days. And that comes from the idea of, you know, being the 80-year-old Filipino man who's still more than able to handle himself with his cane, or the balasong you would never have thought that that old man would have, or his pen, whatever it might be. So that's something that I feel like you embody that as someone who, you know, you might not think, if you're just some guy on the street, that, oh, this lady might literally drop my guts on my feet if things go wrong. But those people are out there, and it's really something that I admire in a lot of the people that I look for in teachers. Is this a person who, you know, some of my teachers in, you know, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, those kinds of guys are younger males still, who are still like, you know, very kind of guys. And I still, that resonates with me still. I still spar Muay Thai. I still get hit in the head way more than I should. I still don't tap as early as I should to do things in jiu-jitsu. But the idea of going home at the end is really, that's the thing that sticks with me. And
yeah, you know, and I know you're kind of interested. I mean, you've always been interested in the crossover to the streets too, you know, and so, you know, I guess that's kind of why we're sort of looking at that crossover a little bit more, because I do think it's important. I think who you are and what you learn in martial arts should be something that carries over, you know. And I think from your perspective, you know, you're young, you know, you got a lot of power and skills now, right? So how you're going to deal with something is probably very different than how I will at my age and of my gender and stuff. And you know, how you carry yourself down the street in the first place, obviously that has like, if you look like you're aware and you can clock what's going on, you're going to have cut down your risk of things happening to you.
Sure. I still run pretty fast too.
You see, I can't run for shit, you know, so it's like, you know, that I went to a boot camp class, you know, at a, you know, local gym for a while. And part of it was always running around the block into the gym. And I was always like freaking slow. I'm like a tank, right? And they were like, oh, you know, maybe you need an incentive. Maybe I should, you know, send somebody to chase you. And I'm like, if you're chasing me, I'll turn around and deck you. You know,
I was going to say, I'd rather fight than run any day.
Work. Yeah, you know, that ain't going to work, because I'm not getting away. And all these people are like, just run. It's like, some of people, it isn't an option, because I don't want you behind me running faster than me. You know what I mean? Like that's just doesn't seem like a great option, not being able to see what you're up to. And so,
yeah, just run is actually bad advice for most people.
Well, if you can run early enough, then you take away the opportunity, then that's freaking glorious. But you have to be able
to run, like you said. Like,
you have to have the distance. Yeah.
Realistically, how much earlier would you have to run from me where I'm not going to catch you in a block or two? How early do you have to run? If my determination is to just run up and tag you, how far do you have to be? How long can I run? How long can you run?
Well, exactly. And you know, like, what is safety? You know, it's like, if I dart into a shop, would you stop? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, you know, again, that context plays a difference, right?
Context, exactly.
So for me, Captain Context, more than anything, it's understanding psychology. It's like understanding context, like just being aware, understanding people and people's tendencies and their movement tendencies and range, and sort of understanding how a blade moves, how a stick moves in space gives me way more options. So if anything that my training crosses over, it's more to do with that. And all the incidents that have happened on the streets of Oakland that I've had have always been, I saw it coming.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I just moved slightly differently, and then whatever that opportunistic moment was kind of changed, and then they decided not to. You know, that's it's kind of weird, because I never know if something would have happened if I hadn't have done that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't have any sort of feedback on like, good one, I'm not going for you. You know, nobody tells me that, you know, on a few occasions that's happened. I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. I'm just going to veer off in this direction. They're
Right.
like, oh, okay, well, that's a bit strange. Or, you know, the guy passes me and kind of does a second look kind of thing. And he goes around the corner. And I'm like, I bet that fucker's going to turn back round. So I ended up staying there and looking in the shop window. And he did. He turned around the corner and I stared at him and then he bailed again. Right. So it's like small stuff like that that has protected me much more than any kind of like mad skills.
Right.
You know.
Well, I mean, like, but you know, the act of walking up to your front door at the end of the night, unlocking it, walking in and locking it, like you won that day, right? Like anything that might have happened, you beat it that day. And whether it was the fact that you're used to some sort of danger, keying off, you know, a person who's a predator, be they a resource predator or a process predator, there's going to be different things, but the last thing they want is an aware victim. Neither of those people are looking for a fight. You know what I mean? They're looking for the least damage that they might take. And just noticing someone being more aware and just looking at someone sometimes is enough that they'll go, oh, fuck, never mind, not this one. Like there's going to be an easier target. And what, you know, like I said, whether they're looking for a thing from you or just the process of causing you harm, you might have derailed their whole plan. You turn them to a better target, or maybe they rethink their life. That's what I'd like to think. Maybe they go, oh, you know, they're like the death stick salesman in Attack of the Clones or whatever. Like, you do not want to sell me death sticks. I do not want to sell you death sticks. You're going to go home and rethink your life. I'm going to go home and rethink my life. You know?
It's like it
Obi-Wan them.
Yeah, well, it was like you saying, you know, you got hit and you got your mask on and you're just like this, and they're like, oh shit, no, okay, fine.
Yeah, they can't see inside my mask. I'm going, God damn, that hurt. Like, that was a good one. I better make him think it wasn't a good one.
Yeah, play it off, man. Play it off.
Yeah, yeah. The Jedi mind tricks are real. Jedi mind tricks are real. Well, I think that's actually, you know, Jedi mind tricks are real isn't a bad place to start to wind it up. Could you let everybody know where they can find you, where they can get a hold of you, and you know, possibly bask in more Jedi mind tricks?
Absolutely. I have a Patreon page, which is patreon.com/art of deception, as one word, art of deception. So that's where I put most of my content now. I will not friend you on Instagram unless I know you and have met you. So all the 1,000 people that sent me things and I ignored, sorry about that, but that's just the way it goes. I'm not that interesting anyway. There's 2 books if you want to read those. They're both on Amazon. One's The Liar, the Cheat, and the Thief, and the other one is The Hustler, which is the newer one. So read those, and you can always message me, you know, get me through Matt or something. How about that?
Okay, that works. We can do it that way. I'll try and filter out the the weirdos as much as possible.
Did you see how I did that? Yeah.
I did. Really, you just made me the human coffee filter right there. I will say the one thing I disagree with you about is that you're not very interesting. I think you are incredibly interesting, and anybody who is interested in following your line of thinking, that Patreon page is awesome. It's not particularly taxing on the finances, and you do a good job of keeping the content flowing. You have some good stuff every week, and I'm constantly thinking when I get to your content. So I really
let me know if there's other things you want me to write about. Honestly, you know, I'm way better in conversation than I am just talking into thin air. So, you know, I'm always up for it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, thank you again, Maija. I really appreciate you coming on here today. And well, I'm gonna paraphrase Crafty. The adventure continues.
The adventure does indeed continue. Thank you for all the questions. I don't know. Maybe we were rather controversial. Let's see if we get any hate mail.
I hope so. All right. Have a good one, guys. We'll catch you next time. Thanks.
All right.